Pay-per-views or PLEs are a cornerstone of professional wrestling, and as we have got to the end of the year, you know what we got to do. We got to use our brains, and we got to pick 10 of the best. And why? I have absolutely no idea. But we do start off with number 10, which is AEW Dynasty. And listen, I understand the criticism and the love of AEW is that you do get matches you always wanted to see. Maybe sometimes they don't involve story. I actually don't agree with that last bit, but I take your criticism. But if you do just want to sit down and you want to take wrestling as a sport and you want to watch some of the best go at it, well, man, you got to go watch Dynasty, which is not an old television show in America. Because on this show, you had Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay, which many people called the best match ever. You had Joe versus Swerve, which nobody talks about enough. You had Pac versus Okada, which, by the way, nobody talks about enough. And you had another match between the Bucks and FTR. Now, this is just top-grade talent. And some of the people I've just mentioned are generational performers and superstars who will be remembered for years and years to come. So I actually think it's a criticism or something to get mad at AEW. They just give you a bunch of good matches. Because I want AEW to be different from WWE, to be different from New Japan, to be different from Ring of Honor. I want it to offer me something totally crazy that I can wake up every day and go, oh my gosh, I feel like a mega nerd in terms of this specific part of wrestling today, and I want a promotion to be able to offer it to me. And I remember by the time I was done with AEW Dynasty, as a pro wrestler myself, I was like, maybe I'm not that good. The truth is, no, you're not that good, Simon. I have other attributes that I can contribute, but I certainly wouldn't be able to perform in the way that they did. And of course, that Danielson versus Ospreay thing. I mean, Danielson himself said, Bryan Danielson has wrestled everybody, and even he said Will Ospreay is one of the best people I've ever been in the ring with, and it was tremendous, and it was fun, and it took you on a roller coaster. But then again, Pac versus Okada, I've been such a Pac fan for like the last, 15 years, whatever the hell it was, and seeing Okada come over here and do this kind of stuff, it's just awesome. Same with Samoa Joe and Swerve Strickland. That to me is like the old and the new coming together in a match I never thought I'd see, which in many ways is the same with the Bucks versus FTR, because of course they were WWE and just non-WWE for such a long time. But to me, it kind of summed up everything good about AEW, and there's a reason people ranted and raved about it to such a degree. It's because they just got a bunch of good wrestling. And sometimes that's what you want from your wrestling show, just to enjoy the wrestling. It's not even a good thing. It's not even a bad thing. It's just the thing. We're all nerds deep down. We may as well enjoy it. And we continue with AEW because I'm also going to put AEW All Out in there. Mostly because of that Chris Statlander versus Willow Nightingale street fight. I really like that match. I mean, the stereotypes around, women having a hardcore match, we really should have moved away from by now. Like, if men are allowed to do it, which is a terrible term, women should be allowed to do it too. It all depends on the story. And by the summer, by August, we'd made it clear that Willow was the good guy and Chris was the bad guy. And Stokely Hathaway was sticking his oar in as well. But it wasn't just the fact that they were violent with this. It just told such a tremendous story. And you do have to bring in context here. It did come after that Will Ospreay versus Pac match, which was tremendous. And was a match that only those two are going to be able to do. Nobody else on the planet is able to do what Ospreay and Pac are able to do. They're number 1 and 2 in many ways. But I think it goes to show the level of quality and the level of wrestler power that Chris and Willow were able to walk out of there and be like, we don't care that they've just come before us. We know what we're doing. We know we have a narrative that people are invested in, and we know what we need to do here in order to get the reaction. And then Chris Statlander did some splits into some thumbtacks, and I think, right, we're done. Let's move on to something else. But I have the whole card up here as well. Obviously, you had the Bucks versus the BCC. Anything with Claudio Castagnoli gets me happy. And it was main evented by Hangman versus Swerve. Now, of course, that cage match arguably isn't as good as the other stuff they had done, but it is still part of their story. And when you're talking about AEW, Hangman versus Swerve is that feud, and it always works, and people are always thinking about it in the back of their mind, and eventually they should fight for the World Championship for sure. But you still did get some nut stuff in it. It was too much for me. I'm not going to lie, especially when we started using syringe, or the cinder block stuff was way, way worse. But they still create an atmosphere, they still create an environment, and given that it was meant to be an unsanctioned match, I think you got to give it a bravo. But I always find All Out pretty difficult because it comes like 1 week, 2 weeks after All In. So I'm like, man, how are they going to pull this off? But AEW has done it twice now. I think All Out 2024 is a damn good show. And number 8 is a recent one. It is the WWE Survivor Series. When I was sitting down, I was like, listen, I enjoyed the Women's War Games match. I mean, it was all over the place, but sometimes that's where the entertainment comes from. Obviously, the men's one was fun because you had everything with CM Punk and Roman Reigns and the Bloodline Civil War, which has been building up for 4 years, arguably. But then I was like, wait a minute. That's the night we had Sheamus versus Ludwig Kaiser versus Bron Breakker for the Intercontinental title. That's one of the best matches of the year. I'm putting it in. You also have Shinsuke Nakamura winning the US title, and you had Gunther versus Damian Priest, and those two had great chemistry. I actually thought this was a really good show. I don't know why I sound so surprised. I think sometimes the internet gets in my head a little bit, but I do think it's one of the best pay-per-views of the year. I don't think we ever need to do two War Games on the same show, but if you are going to do it, at least these two felt totally different. And yeah, seeing a shock title change is always good, but it's just a triple threat. I watched it again before I made this video. Sadly, I didn't have time to watch the whole pay-per-view twice. It's just excellent, man. And Sheamus is reminding us all why he's been underrated talent. And Bron Breakker and Ludwig Kaiser are telling us, yeah, we're going to be the future of this industry, probably the present, so you better get on board. So I really like it. I think it's really good. I think it will be somewhat of a controversial pick, but it's one that I would go and sit down and watch again, even the start of the women's match. I don't care, man. Some of those chair shots are ridiculous, but I watch wrestling to be entertained. And I understand that of all the people, Nia Jax will understand that it went a bit squiffy. I got no problem with it. As long as you can make this bald a-hole laugh, I am totally fine. And we stick with WWE for number 7 because we are going across the seas for both of us, not for me. I could drive there. It's bashing Berlin. And a huge part of this is because, of course, you have that main event between Gunther and Randy Orton for the World Championship. Again, only those two guys could pull it off. I mean, the pace was so slow, but I don't say that as a negative. They made it a positive. Every single thing they did was like, oh my gosh, he's totally dead. And of course, you had everything between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. Now, yes, they would have better matches, but this still counts in terms of the journey they did go on. Plus, it kicks off with Cody Rhodes versus Kevin Owens. Now, given what we know at the end of the year and where that was going to go, that match is even better when you do watch it, especially because we planted those seeds. Kevin Owens probably could have won, but he decided to save Cody Rhodes' leg, which is a very weird sentence, but it's also very, very true. I really like this show, especially because, again, the fans are just so loud. Everything we did overseas, everybody was so loud and so crazy, and people were getting into it. So it's another one. Basically, what I did with this list is I went through a bunch of them and I watched a bunch of stuff. And then I was like, which one would I want to watch overall again? And I would want to watch this because I think you can now, at the end of the year, you'll get more from Punk versus Drew. You'll get more from Cody versus Kevin. And maybe you'll get a bit more from Gunther versus Orton as well. Because again, that thing is so layered in such an interesting way. So it was awesome to see WWE sort of go to so many foreign countries with these shows. I thought this one was pretty damn good. Number 6 may irk some people, but it was the night of stories. And I like to think of myself as a story guy, whatever that means. The WWE SummerSlam. But in the first match, you had Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan, again, who had a great feud all year long. And Dominic Mysterio, I talked about this at the time, he was already a heel, and he went heel. You never go heel when you're a heel. You don't do the double heel turn. But it was so wonderful. And look, we all knew it was going to happen. It was so obvious. We've been building and building and building. But I'm never going to get mad about that. I don't see it as a problem. If anything, it builds anticipation. It's like when you know the hero is about to come back in the action movie. Like, oh, here we go. And you get warm and funny feelings in your tum-tum. So that's how we kick things off. You also had Bron Breakker versus Sami Zayn when Bron Breakker won the Intercontinental title or retained it, whatever the flub it was, by running through Sami Zayn. This was Sami Zayn, who had won that title at WrestleMania. And I think Bron was done with him in 5 minutes. So that surprised me too, and really did help Bron Breakker for the rest of the year. You also had the first match between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk. Some people thought it was disappointing. I was not that guy. I was so into it, they probably could have played chess, and I would have loved it. Gunther wins the World Championship, which again was going to be huge throughout 2024. And while Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa, I mean, some people like it doesn't feel like a main event. I thought it was totally fine. You do get the return of Roman Reigns, and that was huge, and that was mad. Probably the best, or at least the loudest return of the year, I think. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone now, and more for me. But once again, as a show that gave you lots of twists, a lot of turns, a lot of roller coasters, and set up the rest of 2024, I think WWE SummerSlam's really good. Also, the last SummerSlam we're going to get over one night, so you may as well enjoy it that way. So I kind of feel like there's going to be some pushback against this too, but I would go back and watch that whole show again. And also, I really like Solo Sikoa. He's won me over. I prefer the version we've got now, because here he's still not allowed to be funny Solo, but now we do have follow Solo. It's all about a journey. So yes, SummerSlam 2024 is all right by me. Number 5, we do go back to France, and it's WWE Backlash. And sure, a huge reason for this is the crowd. And a huge reason for this is that Jey Uso entrance. I've watched that 500 million times. It's just great. And I think in that moment too, we were all like, oh yeah, Jey Uso could be a massive single star, which he did go on to do. And obviously at one point, he was even selling crazy merchandise, more than Roman Reigns and CM Punk and a bunch of other people. But you also get Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles. Now, this was Cody's first big defense after he won it at WrestleMania 40. People were like, I don't think they liked it because no one thought that AJ Styles was going to win. It's Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles. Two people you could have an even bigger conversation about in terms of their impact on the industry. They went 20 plus minutes and it's just a good old-fashioned professional wrestling match. And my gosh, it was WWE Backlash. Not everything has to be totally wildly crazy, man. I thought this ruled. I really, really did. I love this match and I watched it again just to make sure I do feel that way. And I was totally right. But I also remembered you get the Bloodline versus Kevin Owens and Randy Orton in that street fight, which is also awesome. They just brawl over the place, and we were planting seeds for everything else we were going to do throughout the year. So this is a good show, man. And if we are classifying it as a B pay-per-view, which always sounds so disrespectful, but we'll just go with it because you know what I'm talking about, then it's even more of a home run because some elements of it actually sound like a AAA show. So no problem with this whatsoever. And it starts great and it ends great and the whole thing is great. Number 4 is a hard one too because I think in many ways this could be higher, but the other three kind of battle it out. And I suppose you can say it's a one-match show, but that also feels unfair because actually number 3 is a one-match show as well. WWE Bad Blood. And it's all because of Drew McIntyre and CM Punk in that Hell in a Cell. But I think that's probably the best match of the year, or at least top 3 if you really wanted to get into an argument. I mean, it's so good, and it does so much good for WWE as well. It told everyone that CM Punk is awesome. It reminded that Drew McIntyre is awesome. It brought back the level of danger to Hell in a Cell. It was so bloody. It felt so adult, if that's what you wanted from WWE all this time. And we had a definitive winner, and we had a definitive loser, and it tied into other story threads. And of course, that was in October, whatever it was. It's like a 10-month feud that we were getting a payoff for. It's brilliant, man. And you know it's brilliant because even on television pay-per-view, that's right, you can get it on Peacock or the WWE Network. Some people bought it. It did way more buys than usual, or at least these shows usually do. But you also do get Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes teaming up to take on the Bloodline. You get the appearance of The Rock. Now, I know there's some squiffy stuff to that we could get into the nitty-gritty, but it's still box office, right? And it still makes it so much easier to watch. And all the other matches are totally fine as well. But it is that CM Punk Drew McIntyre match. My only gripe is that it should have main evented. They'd earned that right. And it's a shame they didn't get it. But ultimately, if you do just watch it for what it is as a singles match, it's absolutely fantastic. And I think it's going to do the world of good for both of those guys as their careers do continue to tick on. They're world class. They're top level performers. And really, based on that match alone, Bad Blood does have to get on there. But if you're going to give me an all-time classic, your pay-per-view is getting in the list. And number 3 is a very similar conversation. It's AEW Revolution from back in February. It's all about Sting retiring, man. I love Sting. I think Sting is one of the best of all time. I think for a while there, people forgot the icon was so good, and that used to upset me. Came back to AEW. Teams with Darby Allin. They win the tag team titles. They take on the Young Bucks here. They have the most insane match you've ever seen with Glass. Imagine I told you in like 1989, Sting's last match is going to involve Glass. You're like, what the flub are you talking about? You probably would have been surprised he was a tag team guy and his partner not being Lex Luger. But it's just perfect, and it's the best send-off for a legend, right? He is a Hall of Famer, all of those words that we use. So for AEW to build the entire pay-per-view around him to make sure he got the send-off he deserved, he wanted to lose, which was the wrong call, Steve Borden, so I'm glad Tony Khan made that call. It's just brilliant. I go watch it all the time, and it makes me have water in my seeing devices. And that's why I watch wrestling, to be moved, to be emotional, and to care about these people, and I really do. And I understand that makes me feel like a geek, but I'm totally cool with that as well. So I mentioned it for Bad Blood. I mentioned it here. When I turned that pay-per-view off, I just felt elated, and I felt happy, and I felt like proud to be a wrestling fan. So how the flub can you not put it in a list? I'll go back and watch it until the cows come home. It is the best ending and the defining legacy of that Sting character, of Steve Borden, whatever you want to call him. His sons are involved. Darby Allin gets it. The Young Bucks totally get it. It's brilliant, man. And seeing him finish with that tag team title, 7.25 stars. And we stick with number 2. And listen, I do admit I was second row live for this, which is always going to change my experience. But I think that's half the fun, right? You watched it on TV, I watched it here. And I have gone back and watched it on television. It's AEW All In 2024. I also just think there's so many good matches on it. Like Bryan Danielson winning the AEW World title from Swerve. They have one of the best matches of the year. So that's a huge tick box. Then you get the big old moment, the WrestleMania type moment, which we like. MJF versus Will Ospreay, I was a huge fan of. I thought they were so damn good. I think the Casino Gauntlet is the best one that AEW has done, and once again, one of the best matches of the year. Ricochet turns up, Nigel McGuinness turns up, Okada is hilarious throughout that thing. And it's just dotted with other matches as well. You've got Mariah May versus Toni Storm, where you get a big old title chain. You get the ladder match. And even something like Darby Allin versus Jack Perry, which I think was clearly cut for time. Sting turns up. I've just told you what I think of Sting. So we kind of assumed this in 2023 that AEW was going to turn All In into their WrestleMania, but I actually think it's the 2024 one that really staked that claim, which now in 2025 allows them to sing about it even more. It's brilliant. It's a really, really good show, and I think AEW pay-per-views go too long. This one, I don't think that. Be it because I was there live or when I watch it back, I have those same kind of feelings. It just flies on by. And I wouldn't say every match is better than the last. No match is bad, but I don't think it sort of goes on an upward curve like that. But every single match gives you something. And even on the pre-show, you get the return of Jamie Hayter. I mean, that was a mistake. Maybe she should come back on the main show. But I think it's really good. I think it's the AEW's best output of the entire year. And I think it's that kind of feeling and that kind of emotion they should try and get into their product constantly, because it's just flubbing brilliant. Like, it really is. And John Moxley's not even on that show, which is kind of crazy now when you look back on it. That's not a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying it goes to show how much we have changed since then. But everything that AEW set out to do, they didn't just do. They just did it in the best way. Which is also true for number one. Of course, you figured it out. It's WWE WrestleMania 40. I don't think we need to separate night one and night two. WrestleMania now is a two-night event. I think this would be the same for a New Japan if I did the Tokyo Dome shows, or if AEW ever wants to do a weekender. But of course, it peaks with Cody Rhodes finishing his story, right? It's wonderful. It's brilliant. It's a lot of the same words that we've already been using. I think the Cody Roman match is awesome as well. We forget about that. The second half is hilarious because we forget about wrestling. It's like, who's going to turn up next? But I want that in my life. But look at everything else you get. Io Sky versus Bayley, title change. One of the most underrated matches of that entire weekend. Gunther versus Sami Zayn, also brilliant. Everything with Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins for that world title. My gosh, that's a barrel of laughs. Then you have the tag team match with The Rock on night one. Some people don't like certain elements of this, but if you do watch it, I mean, you have to get rid of all the faff. You get rid of all the WrestleMania faff, which it always has. It's just happy times, good times, big times. It's WWE done right, essentially. And I think WrestleMania 41 could be even bigger than this. I mean, it'd be bigger, but maybe even better too, depending on what we do get across there. But apart from the cold weather, because I was live at this too, but also watched it back. Apart from the cold weather, I think it lives up to the WrestleMania 40 thing. And even if it wasn't as fun as I believe it to be, having it end with Cody Rhodes finishing that story a year on when we didn't know what was going to go down, it cements it. It's the most fun I had all year in terms of a pay-per-view point of view. I think WrestleMania always has higher expectation because it is WrestleMania, but I didn't feel disappointed, which I also think is a huge success. And I think you could put this up against any other pay-per-view from this year, which I have done, and WrestleMania 40 would come out on top, which is essentially how I organized this list. I was like, what can top WrestleMania 40? And there's nothing. And again, I go back and watch a lot of the matches all of the damn time. Even the tag team ladder match is pretty fun. I don't like the fact we split the titles, but actually watching, you're like, well, this is a good time. So yeah, really excellent stuff. And the Money in the Bank stuff on the start of Sunday just sets the tone really well. I do believe it's the best pay-per-view of 2024. Now, of course, you need to tell me your best pay-per-views in the comments below. If you like the video, share the video and subscribe. Click the video on the screen. It'll be one of my best off lists, I'm sure. And the notification bell. Otherwise, please do get your supplements at GorillaMind.com/Simon. You can Simon get 10% off. It ships worldwide. I vouch for these. I promise you they will help you in your fitness journey. Simon316 on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads and all of those kind of things. Patreon.com/Simon316. Simon Miller, Simon J. Miller on TikTok. Simon Miller on Cameo. ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller to get yourself some merchandise. It's all in the links in the description, so click away to your heart's content, interact with this video. Otherwise, have a great Christmas, holiday, New Year, my friends, and see you soon.